just going to call my panel up, and then we'll get some introductions going. So if you know who you are, come on up, please. Please welcome to the stage our trusted colleagues and panelists. So I thought for sure we'd be in a great spot because we had the privacy thing right after lunch, and that would like kind of scare most of the crowd off, but we're going to have to perform now. So, but we're going to have fun with this panel, and I'm going to start by just introducing each of you, and then I'll ask each of you to tell the crowd here a little bit more about yourselves. So JJ, we've had the pleasure of knowing each other for a while, return attendee to our event here, so thank you for that. JJ is the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Wells Fargo Home Lending, and I also know that JJ had a great tour of duty through Caliber Home Lending as well as Capital One prior, and recently had a life-changing event at home with your son, so I'll turn it over to you to tell the audience a little bit more about that.
He just went to college. No big deal.
Hey, that's big for all of us who've sent kids to college, right? Yeah. Yes, thank you.
It was fun. Actually, when I think Priya was talking about all the college frustrations that someone has to go through during high school, I lived through all of that. So those 2 years was different. All 10 years of high school of schooling is different, and the last 2 years is different. So it was crazy. But yeah, I have been within financial services industry for almost all my career, especially in the marketing domain, starting with Capital One, then Caliber, and then Wells Fargo. And all through this journey, I think we have used at least 2 or 3 times, like both Jornaya and Infuture Solutions. So I still have that Jornaya jacket.
I didn't tell him to say any of that, okay? He's ad-libbing right now. That's not on my notes.
When I was packing to come to Chicago, I was actually looking for that jacket we had, and I still have it. But yeah, we'll talk about some good fun stuff today, and with our esteemed panel. So
yeah, so thank you, and we're getting him warmed up. So not much more necessary. You're ready to roll here. So, Valerie, thank you for joining us. A little bit more local. JJ, by the way, joined us from Dallas, so thank you for making the trip. Valerie, a little more local from St. Charles here. Always in insurance, and started as an actuary. So interesting background.
Can you hear me? Started in the actuarial department, took a few exams, and pivoted to marketing when the Zurich that I worked at right out of college spun up a direct-to-consumer business a long time ago, in the 90s. So I've been in life insurance my whole career, again, with Zurich, AIG. Now I've spent the last 7 years at Fidelity Life and eFinancial. Fidelity Life is a product manufacturer, so we manufacture permanent insurance products for the middle market. And then eFinancial is a life insurance agency that has a call center, multiple call centers that sell life insurance products for both Fidelity Life and for third-party carriers. So very excited to kind of talk about what we're seeing with our data and what we're all doing, sharing that with you.
Excellent. And now for Mr. Vince from the Motor City. Pleasure to have you on stage with us. Vince oversees CRM marketing for Ally, does a ton of cross-sell work inside the bank, and I'll let you tell the audience a little bit more about what that's all about, Vince.
Sure. My role at Ally is I oversee CRM and customer marketing for Ally Auto, Lending, Home Mortgage, and some of our consumer insurance partnerships. That involves customer retention, onboarding, cross-selling. Previous to Ally, I've been working there for about 5 years. I spent most of my career in advertising at some of the bigger firms, McCann and Leo Burnett, for about 10, 12 years. And then really, I just have a strong passion for delivering personalized and relevant customer experiences. And I'm looking forward to kind of sharing that with you all today.
Thank you, Vince. And certainly last but not least, all the way down there, Heather. Good to have you with us. So Heather, why don't you tell everybody what your role is? We're delighted to have you as part of our Infutor team that's joined Marketing Solutions. So please introduce yourself to the crowd.
Hi, everyone. Heather Geffen, and I have been working in the consumer research industry for many, many years, and I had to tell this story to begin with because I thought it was hilarious that Second City actually was talking about DVDs, because my first job before getting into consumer research was actually installing CDs on people's computers for software and troubleshooting. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have a job still if I was in that industry. So I thought, kind of taking it forward, I've worked in account management, I've worked in also a lot with the product side of building software, but also building data assets. So I've done a lot of the journeying of how people would actually use software and the data assets within it.
I've got news. I prompted ChatGPT, and they're going to bring that job back. So AI has created that job again for you. So welcome back. All right. So in prep for this panel, we had a lot of fun trying to figure out what the audience might want to hear on a subject that's pretty wide-ranging in terms of customer segmentation. And to keep this interesting, and it's after lunch, so we are going to inject some buzzwords into this panel that, since we're in a safe place, we all use them quite a bit as marketers. So the first buzzword I'm going to bring to the table here, and if the audience wants to play along, raise your hand, enter some commentary, but the first buzzword is Customer 360. Is that really a thing? JJ, what do you think?
So I think the word customer 360 means that you need to know about customer fully, right? In and out, everything. Like, we want to know more about customers. Where do they go? What do they study? What's their habits? And many times, like, I have wondered, now that I've spent like 25 years in the industry, like, why do I want to marry the customer? Like, I don't know 360 degree of my wife. Like, you ask her that question, he can't understand customer. Like, he doesn't understand me yet. So I think it's definitely a buzzword that I think we are totally overusing right now.
Yeah, Vince, I think you have some perspective on this. It's like, do we really need to know everything about the customer, or things that the customer is going to appreciate that we know about them?
Yeah, exactly. I think overall the concept of aggregating all of your customer data in one place, be it basic data, attitudinal data, marketing preferences, could be really powerful. But at the end of the day, actually achieving that, depending on the size of your organization, the complexity of the data issue that you have, or the organizational priorities, it might be harder to achieve. So I always, kind of sounds a little bit like a buzz phrase in itself, but I always start with looking at it through the eyes of the customer and what is important along the journey that I'm creating for whatever product or initiative that we're launching. And if you look at that and stitching that together across the customer journey through a journey map, you'll get, down to maybe, a couple dozen variables that you actually need to know to execute on that. So that would be like my customer 360 starter pack for, the campaign or whatnot.
Heather, how about, with all your experience, not only with Verisk Marketing Solutions, but in your prior roles at other data companies, like, give the audience a little perspective from your point of view.
So I've worked at Experian, Nielsen, MRI Simmons, and here, and every single one of these providers that I've worked at thinks of it similarly, which is there's a big circle or a wheel, at the center is the consumer, and everything about them is all the different pieces of information that you're looking to understand. Whether it's marketing speak or not, that's how a lot of the industry is trying to think of who's the consumer at the center, and then the spokes of the wheel are going to tell you all of the attributes of demographics or geographies. You're looking at the different identity or contact points, but everyone has some version of it.
So talking a little bit more about the right consumer insights and data and getting it right. I know, Valerie, when we were talking about this, you had something to say about just how you put the data together, and talk a little bit about how that experience has been and what your focus has been inside of Fidelity on that.
Yeah, so on our side, because we're very focused on the lead acquisition channel, we get data from a variety of sources. So our goal has been to tie that together to get one source of truth, which we have for reporting, but not for everything. So if you envision a consumer going to a landing page and filling out a form, we're ingesting that data via APIs, and then we're appending outside third-party data to that. So that's called kind of living in one place. And then a customer decides to purchase a life insurance policy. There's now underwriting data, policyholder data. There's all this customer activity that's going on. So data is living in different buckets, but as long as we have that connector, one thing into each bucket to tie it together, we're able to take action on it. So that's kind of been the ongoing challenge, as well as like getting to that end result. It's kind of, it's not done, but we have enough tie-in now and enough data across these different channels to take action and personalize things more for customers.
Excellent. And so as you're thinking about stitching all this different data together, trying to orchestrate how that plays back to the customer, we'll kind of cross over into what was talked about earlier in the day around data accuracy. So in marketing, depending upon you ask, if it's a friend of yours that does marketing, you might get a different definition on what accuracy is versus somebody who's not in marketing who has a much holier-than-thou definition of what accurate data may be. And back to the conversation on the ad panel with Zora's esteemed panelists around, reach versus quality. And Vince, we were talking about this, and I think you had some good perspective. It'd be great to share with the group on how you think about data accuracy at Ally.
Yeah, and I think Larry Allen from Compass, who you were referencing, gave a pretty similar answer to the one that I'm going to give. And really it depends first on what you're using the data for, whether you're using it for segmentation or whether you're using that data point to actually come to life in some sort of creative messaging that you're giving to a customer. And then the second part of it is like, how bad can it be if it's incorrect, right? There's obviously certain things that are, non-starters. If this isn't correct, there's no way we can do this, and not. If it's a targeting thing and you reach out to somebody about a product that they might not be interested in, I mean, not the end of the world. You'd like to avoid it. But if it's, a particular data point about how much their next car payment is going to be, definitely has to be correct. I also think that there's different layers that you can apply to that as well. There's certain customer records or files that you're going to be more confident in than others. You can use, logic to determine which ones are kind of outliers and maybe, give a more generic message to that group and be able to, deliver a more relevant and personalized experience to others. So there's different ways to think about it. And I think if you waited until everything was 100% correct all of the time, you'd have some really kind of generic segmentations and even more generic creative messaging. So, you just kind of got to get a little creative with it, I guess.
You were borderline on having the baby analogy right there. You're never really ready to have the baby. But this campaign has got to ship, right?
Right.
Valerie, you had a great example of your millennial insurance product and how you make sure when you reach out that you're getting accurately into that campaign. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we developed a new life insurance product targeted toward millennials, using a lot of research to develop both the product concept and the user experience. And because this product, it's a shorter term duration product, it's time bound. So the initial marketing of the product, like Vince said, we want to target the right person, but it's not so imperative that you're exactly on target, with every variable. But after the person's purchased and they're coming up at the time their policy is going to expire, and we need to say, hey, are you ready to buy something else? Are you ready to buy the next product? Do you want to buy this again? Then we need to make sure we have accurate data so we can drive them to an experience, have them authenticate their information so they can actually log in, see what they have now, and see what they're now eligible for next. So when you're getting into actual, things that someone owns, policies or products, financial services, that's where the data really has to be accurate, because if someone logs in as somebody else, that's going to open up a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, so let's kind of wrap up this customer 360 concept. JJ, we'll bring it back home to you, but we've had the pleasure of working with you now. And can you talk about really when you think about categories of data, from a high level perspective, what those categories are from a demographic versus behavioral, and how you think about that strategically when trying to oversee some of the segmentation operation when you're going after share a wallet, work for a big bank and attention of the customer? What really are kind of the must-have?
Yeah, so, I mean, before we go into the categories are, I mean, we'll talk about that in a second. But one thing I first wanted to say is more important, like in the past few years, I have seen more and more focus on getting more and more data. That's why this 360 thing always kind of baffles me a little bit. We try to get more and more information from various sources.
That was my cue to make the mic not work again, because it's working for us all day.
So getting more information is what we have generally tried to achieve in past few years. But I think the part that we are still missing is once you get all the info, or most of the information, or whatever information you need, what do you do with that information? Like, for me, suppose I'm selling you a refinance product for your mortgage. Well, I need to just know what is your current rate and what is the new rate I can offer you, which you will get approved for, and you can save money. I don't think like the same way Jeff Bezos has once said, things that will not change is people will always want to save money and they will need things faster. So if I can give you a process that will save you money and this whole process will take less time, what else do I need to know about you? And that is where we lose the plot. We try to collect information, collect big CRMs, collect data, build this uber thing about one single source of truth that will stitch all the data and give me a profile. We have to spend time, no doubt about it, but the effort that we put in utilizing that information to actually give the relevant information to the customer for their benefit, that's where we lose the plot. Because ultimately you're selling a refinance product. Now going back to your question around targeting, I need to know about your current product. What is the current product you're using? How much money you are spending on that? What is the new offer you will be getting or your propensity to apply for that product? Little bit information about your location, hence demographic. Little bit of information around your behaviors, like who is the decision maker in a household, who makes financial decisions versus others, that kind of thing, and your credit quality in terms of your approvability. I think that's it. That's it.
Yeah, you mentioned propensity. We'll come back to that in a minute. But anybody else have anything to add to that further?
No, I think that's right. We, are on the same wavelength there in terms of how we approach that. And there's very basic data that you have on customers that you can use to build some pretty powerful segments, even with, a pretty generic product like home, for instance. If just knowing somebody has a home or not have a home can, lead to how you're messaging. So really basic stuff like that with a few more advanced, variables or propensity maybe layered on top of that can really lead you to build some powerful segments. And a lot of that stuff you have already potentially, or you could, get through a third party very, very easily and, inexpensive.
Heather, why don't you tie this up for us?
I was going to weigh in and say that we, even at Verisk, have this concern of like, how do we weigh all of this and how do we bring it all together? Because we don't have unlimited budget, right? Just like you guys don't. I mean, I could probably give you guys a tip jar and you'll probably make a small little dent here. How do we actually make the most of our data and what we actually bring in? So I work with an oldie but goodie sort of solution, which is the 4 C's. I love that Christine was able to do the 4 P's. I get to do 4 C's. It is compliant, it is correct, it is current, and it is complete. Those are the things that we look for and when we're sourcing data, when we're trying to bring in the segmentation data, when we're trying to bring in identity attributes. We're always trying to look at the holistic piece of that, of how we can use those 4 data assets.
Thank you. Nicely done. All right, so we're going to keep moving, and we're going to get more into some of the heart of the matter, and we're going to try to frame this in the customer's point of view. And it's a word that's been used quite frequently here today. It's a word I think we can all relate to, but I often feel like it's thrown around without a lot of definition for what are we really meaning when we say personalization. So it gets a lot of airplay. We talk about it. Everybody's talking about it. I've got some stats. And just these two quotes, to me, are at opposite ends of the spectrum of providing some clarity. 90% of leading marketers say personalization significantly contributes to their business profitability. That's a Google quote. Well, what do they mean when they say personalization? Versus customers want businesses to understand their individual requirements and expectations, while 66% feel they are often treated like numbers. That was from Salesforce. I think the second quote gives me a lot more tangible detail to grab onto. And so anybody in the audience, how many people use the personalization card, say, we're trying to do this well, don't be shy, just a hand raise. I'm not gonna call on you, I'm not gonna sing you out. Vince, you got a good perspective on this. Why don't you tell us, when you think of personalization, what do you really mean when you say that?
I think really personalization boils down to not so much personalization for me, but taking it one step further in terms of relevancy to the customer. I can personalize an email by saying, hi, Vince, or hi, Matt. Some level of personalization, but if the offer that's behind that is not relevant to me, that's not very personalized. So I think about using all of the aggregate data sources that we have, and being a customer marketer like myself, we generally have a lot to know about our customer, and we deliver the content that makes having something like hi Vince make sense in the email or in whatever touch point that it is. So that's kind of the way I think about personalization. A lot of that manifests in the actual creative element that we're showing customers, not just what a mortgage rate is today, but I know that you're potentially in the market for a mortgage. I'm not just going to send you what our mortgage rate is today. I'm going to send what's the mortgage rate in your zip code today. Just small things like that are proved to increase relevancy and performance long term. So that's kind of how I think about it overall.
Yeah, I think for all of us, to me, that really hits home. It's like, hey, you can use the term personalization, but really, I think what we mean is how do we help you become relevant? And tying that back to Anat's big takeaway, right, with the attention deficit that we have, like you're immediately going to get somebody's attention if it's relevant, right? But it can't be annoying. So there's other examples of personalization. We heard the shoe example. That one's a commonly understood one on the retargeting front. How about some of these intelligent systems that go study your profile data, free and open on the web, and then think they're personalizing a communication? JJ, why don't you tell us
So I'll tell you the example, and I agree 100%. Personalization should be relevance, that's all, nothing else. Like my team and we have worked with many different sub-teams, and they will come up with ideas around, we are doing personalization on this platform, and that just means putting my name in there, hey JJ, blah, 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 and then you have paid $200 of your mortgage. I'm like, yeah, I know I did. It comes from my checking account every month. So I don't know what they try to do. Like, that doesn't help me. Similarly, there's a great example, actually, that's the one I shared with Matt. I recently got an email. I'm a UT Austin alum, so go Longhorns. And I'm a proud Longhorn. So somebody obviously found either on my LinkedIn or somewhere. Everyone knows, like if anyone is following me, they will know that I'm from UT. So this email said, news from University of Texas at Austin, or hey Longhorn, news from, something like that. And obviously it caught my attention. Like my son is going to UT now, so I was like, oh, must be relevant. And relevant is what came to my mind, that it has to be relevant because it talks to my college. I opened the email, and it was a sales pitch for some other product, saying, as being a University of Texas alum, you know the value of something, and then the rest of the pitch was that something. That pissed me off. Like, this is... And guess what? What did I do? I immediately unsubscribed it. I didn't even read. I don't even remember what the main pitch was about. What is the point of this personalization with somebody, some tech guy, some data guy must have spent time figuring out a profile of bunch of these industry leaders, one of them being me, finding out about my college and trying to reach out to me through college, only to be unsubscribed in the very first time I open the email. So personalization, data insights, customer 360, all of these things are double-edged swords. Use them nicely and in the right way, in the relevant way. That's the only way it will work.
Well, there's nothing humanizing about just automating faster, trying to be inauthentic, right? And a lot of these tools have kind of raced and jumped the shark on, yeah, I can get fast about thinking I know you, but I'm not really, do I really know you? I'm just sending something that has some bit of maybe relevance, maybe not, right? And then you're even in a worse position. Anything else on that to add?
I think relevance is also about the emotional component of it. And it's not necessarily, like demographics is always going to be important. But I used to work for Simmons, and at Simmons we had these survey questions. When I first started, I thought they were the most ridiculous questions that were asked. It was, a woman's place is in the home, the point of drinking is to get drunk, and marijuana should be legalized. And at the time I was like, these are kind of silly. But if you think about something like Bud Light, what's happened with them recently, they really got the emotional part or the human aspect wrong. They didn't get their target right because they didn't reach them with the right message. So I think you'll have to think about it more holistically than just that to be relevant.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to dabble into authenticity. So we can talk a little bit about authenticity and Valerie, I don't know if you've got any thoughts there, but again, when you think about invoking emotion and trying to put yourself in the consumer's point of view, we probably once a week in our business, like all of you, we're trying to market to consumers and get it right. And you think you're driven by the customer experience, but you inevitably go to dinner or you meet some friends down the street and they ask you what business you're in, and almost every time you forget, if I just told the story from the consumer's point of view, they'd probably get what I do for a living. But no, that's not where I go. We're a data company, blah, blah, personalization, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, then they walk to the cooler to get another drink. But what would you say about that? Life insurance, right? That's got to evoke emotion. You've got to get somebody like in the right frame of mind to take action. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, getting life insurance is a very personal decision. It's not a required purchase like an auto insurance if you have a car. We try not to use scare tactics in our marketing. And really, when we look at consumer research, what we see is there's different themes around what holds people back from buying. So, and I'm sure that applies to any industry. But price misperceptions. People think it costs more than it does. There's educational components. Because people don't buy life insurance, many times during their life, they don't understand it. They don't understand what types there are. Am I losing this? How much it costs, how much they need. So a lot of our content is really focused on education. Once a consumer raises their hand and says, I'm interested in getting a life insurance quote, and then they don't purchase, it's really about following up with them, learning what they spoke up to the agent about on the phone, and following up with them and giving them relevant content that may get them over that procrastination and trigger that purchase. We'll also look at different life events. So getting married, having a baby, buying a house, changing jobs are all things that might trigger a consumer to purchase. So we're always looking at those things to stay relevant, stay authentic, get a lot of consumer feedback through reviews, listening to phone calls with our agents. We're just.
I think that's where a huge opportunity with this AI, generative AI, is now I can start to understand kind of how you behave as a consumer. I'm not trying to pretend that I know you, but I can walk closer in the lane of things that I think that you're interested in and that are likely going to be worthy of your attention and time, more so than me thinking that I know exactly who you are as Valerie and the life you lead. All right, I'm going to go to the hard-hitting question for you, JJ, because I think you're up for the task. So Wells Fargo, right? Some tough press, some tough media coverage about, how some of your customers and accounts have been opened, and you're in the envious position of you've got to increase share of wallet in the lending line versus where you came from in a lesser-known brand. Caliber versus coming from Capital One. You had mentioned being able to kind of paint the differences of getting in the seat of leading the marketing program. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, I think that's, this has been a tough one. I have faced, when we were in Capital One home lending, Cap One was always known for credit cards. And when we started cross-selling home lending, we were surprised to find out that customers, the credit card customers, did not know that we have a mortgage business. Whenever we send them mortgage letters, even though it was highly relevant, they would not open it because they think, oh, they're selling me credit cards. I already have their card. And so, like, unbundling ourselves from the big credit card brand that they built to make roadways into cross-selling other products, that was a pain point in Cap One. Caliber was a relatively unknown brand, and that's why it's most like more like a set benchmark where you can, when you put effort to build your recognition and your brand recognition, then you will actually get more from it. But then this is the first time I was facing the situation where this Wells Fargo is an established brand for last 100 years. It was a brand darling. Still is a brand darling. I'm actually surprised by the love that we still feel from our own customers in terms of the Wells Fargo brand. But then this negative news came up, and then our trust metrics went down. If you are neutral or you are unknown, I thought it. I mean, from my experience, it seemed that it's still an easier task to build a brand. But once you have fallen from that trust thing that has been kind of shaken, getting up from that place is relatively hard. But kudos, like I'm seeing for last 5 years, the effort that Wells Fargo has put in. We are seeing a more recognition of the fact that, yep, mistakes were made, but they are definitely fixing it. And the best example of somebody who did that, Wells Fargo is still in the process of doing it, so I'm not declaring success yet. But Domino's did a fantastic thing around it. They literally said, yep, we tasted our pizza, it sucked. The CEO came on TV, talked about it. And then the effort they put in there, I mean, that was amazing. We have to learn from them.
Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. One of the things I was a little shocked didn't come up earlier in the panel with all the media folks up on stage was, and I think it really hits at the heart of the matter for everybody in the room, is this notion of frequency. So when you think about customer point of view, yeah, I got to spend the right time to think I'm going to really put a message out there that resonates with my audience. But then just how much do I have to get out there? And you know, to Heather's point earlier, we struggle with this too, right? Because I mean, just having the luxury of intersecting with all of you today, it's clear to me we haven't done a good job ourselves of, hey, have we really told you exactly what we're up to and how we're going about that? But when we think about frequency, again, putting you back on the mic here, JJ, you talked about you know, how marketers are typically measured and where you're thinking about really tracking over time versus in the moment. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think frequency is another, I think, word.
Buzzworthy.
Buzzword, yeah. I mean, free channels, you will see the question of frequency coming up in email and your website impressions and everything, where the cost is less. Like in direct mail and display and other channels, the cost element of it takes care of the relevancy and hence the frequency. So it's the free channels that I get worried about. So there also, I think there's no right frequency. Different subsegments have different answers. Different life cycles have different answers. But one thing that is important, again, what to watch out for. I was in a discussion with a fellow CMO, and they were saying, why are we not emailing our customers 5 times a week? What's wrong in it? Retail does it. I get it from my 7-Eleven vendors all the time. I like, retail versus like selling Slurpee versus selling mortgage, very different things. But the question was, they thought that we were relevant. Why were we relevant? Because we have data. What data do we have that tells you that we should be emailing them 5 times a week? Well, we have propensity models. So we are not randomly sending emails to everyone. We are only sending it to top deciles. Now here's the fallacy. Any response model that you have just tells you that the top decile is maybe 5% response and your bottom decile is 2% response. So you are playing in that zone of 5 to 2% response. Still, even your top decile, 95% of customers are not going to respond. So you are using data to feel relevant and to take actions that you yourself as a consumer would never advocate for. And that is the fallacy we need to worry about whenever we have data, personalization, or any of these buzzwords. Take care of what it will make you do that is wrong.
Well, you put it in the context of most marketers. I'd be curious to see a show of hands here. Are you really measuring your results over time? Are you more glorified or condemned for a campaign performance? Right? I think JJ turned us on to that. If you're really being driven by the here and now of let's launch a campaign and let's see what that campaign does.
Generally campaigns, that's what generally happens across the board.
How does everybody else feel about that? True, false? True. So if you're thinking campaign by campaign by campaign, and through the years, I've been I had the luxury of selling a lot of marketing technology. So the promise of the marketing technology is it's easier. You can maximize cheaper channels. But if you're not looking at the burn-in of that over time, you're only as good as how much your customers are going to continue to pay attention. And in the attention deficit society we're in, if I just hammer you and hammer you and hammer you, that's not a good ending to that story. Valerie, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I think, part of it is just always be testing. Whatever you're testing, make sure you know what you're measuring. We've really instituted an always learning mentality at our company. So when you're measuring, whether it's a campaign or a longer term group of campaigns, what lift are you getting, but what are the negative consequences? So if it's email, yeah, getting more response, but are we getting more opt-outs? If it's SMS, texting, same thing. Are people responding, but are we getting too many people saying, don't call me again, don't text me again? So you really need to weigh the pros and cons and make sure, it's a net positive.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think listening to the voice of the customer, outside of that, what you're getting back from survey responses and social media interactions, email frequency is an interesting thing because, to JJ's point, you want to deliver for business result purposes and get a great, meet your business goals. But we really have to look at the long-term success of customer metrics, long-term, in my case, long-term growth of multi-line of business customers, which can be sacrificed by, short-term, grabs for, leads and, cross-sell email or something.